Thinking Christmas around the corner and nothing under the mattress, wondering what we need to do to help the economy grow? Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Join our co-sponsors, Dom Dev Enterprises and Page Investments, and our friends at Island News Realty, D1 Development, Sammy's Chicken, and Cara and the boys down there on West Side Barbershop. That's the ones, who keep me all ship sharp and make me look like people every week. Well, as we go, we'd like you to post your questions and tell us where you are from, what part of the world you're acting from, and we will endeavor to answer them. Let us think about what we're about to do, and hopefully it'll be of value to us, to you. We'll be right back.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we can attract. And what we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative 2 for 2. COVID is our number one priority. At least that's what I think. And this evening we have a special guest, as you can see on the screen, the good doctor, as I call him, Dr. Duane Sands. Welcome, Doc. Oh, you're muted. Unmute him.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Technology, mess you up all the time.
No, don't worry about that. You be in some places would use technology every day to help us to stay on this earth. So I don't buy that technology is bad or doing things. Hi, Vanessa. Yes. Well, Doc, you are a former Minister of Health, but we ain't tackling that tonight. Because we invited you because you are considered a top medical doctor in this 242, as far as I'm concerned. And you are highly respected in the region. Many places I go and I say from the Bahamas, and they ask me a couple of names. One is Dr. Miles Monroe, one would be yourself. And at one point in time, it would have been Perry Christie, because I guess he was on every single thing, the former prime minister. But, those things come with merit and ability, that people's respect comes with that. It doesn't happen overnight for many people, but I take my hat off to you. I ain't got no hat on, I ain't got no hair to tip, but I tip you anyway as you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So, Doc, as we mentioned, one of the people was Dr. Miles Monroe. Well, this evening today, if I remember right, some 7 years ago, when he and his crew on that fatal flight into Freeport, and he did not make it. Ready for a conference that I always used to go to a lot and love that conference. And earlier I missed the conference, but if we could just take a couple of seconds here and give a moment of silence and reverence to Dr. Miles Monroe and the crew, his wife and pastor. So mote it be. Now, Dr. Miles Monroe always said that leadership and politics were diapole. They could not function in the same space. And there was always going to be a conflict. It's just like night and day. Once light came into the room, the darkness disappeared. And so we have a slight twist on that, and we say that it's the politicians, or he said, because politicians had perpetual to seek power, self-power in the moment, whereas leaders were able to empower people for generations. And that was the philosophy behind how he came up with that. But I said that in our arguments or our discussions with him was that the two were both necessary for the development and the building of any nation and country and people. And so I always said that it's an equitable balance that had to be made between the politician in leadership and leadership in the politician. So I don't know where your perspective on that is, and that's about as far as we're going to touch on the political side of the fence.
I'm not sure I agree with Dr. Monroe. I think that sometimes the two can coexist in the same person. Dr. Monroe was actually my neighbor on Yorkshire.
Yeah.
He lived a few doors down from me. And certainly, my life as it interconnected with his spanned many decades. But, I in no means diminish the significance of his influence on thought in the Bahamas. But in this particular instance, I would disagree.
Yes. Well, we disagreed on a number of things, and that's when you really learned, because then you sat down and you debated those things. And I found him to be very, very much generous in his depth of thought and so forth. But we just wanted to give the reverence that he does, because he's been an impact in many people's lives. And hopefully we all will be able to change that level or more in impacting people and our nation. So, Doc, this evening, one of the things we wanted to do is to help our audience, the people of the Bahamas and the world at large who are listening and watching, to understand the connection between the importance of breaking the back of COVID and the relief of their sufferings, including possible death from COVID. What's that connection? I always feel that if people understand where they fit in a picture, they are more inclined to do the things that they need to be doing to help you, whether it's work or church or whatever it is. Yeah.
Boy, you chose a tiny topic, eh? And I guess the way to start this off is to acknowledge that COVID-19 is arguably the single greatest issue of our lifetime, certainly impacting economies, health, the fate of countries, families, etc. But with duress comes opportunity. And so COVID has also created opportunities, albeit in a disproportionately narrow sense, seemingly because it has also resulted in the concentration of wealth in fewer hands, but it has created wealth.
Yes. Okay.
And so what is very clear is that, notwithstanding the fact that it's only been just shy of 2 years that we learned about this virus coming out of Wuhan, China, if we do not break the back of COVID, then I believe that we will see phenomenal loss in a number of spheres: education, economy, mental health, general health, longevity, etc. And this last 18 to 22 months has demonstrated that COVID has created opportunities for us to fast track development.
Yes.
Look at this meeting. Right now, we're having a meeting on the internet, and it is commonplace.
Yep.
The digitization of interaction of human beings is now commonplace. It is the norm.
Yes.
This was unheard of.
Well, actually, when I was at that telecom place and we put in all of this infrastructure some 20 odd years thereabouts as we started to build out and everything, these were some of the things that we tried to promote that wasn't embraced. But like you say, one event comes along, slap us a couple of times, and now we're embracing it just without resistance. I guess it's because of survival. Is that the reason why we're doing it now versus before?
Look at the terms that have entered the parlance of day to day, and I don't want to call any brand names, right?
Right.
But we now ask the question when somebody says we're having a meeting: we doing this live or we doing this virtual?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll call a couple brand names of different platforms, and that is the norm. Fella got on his suit and his bedroom slippers and some short pants, or his jacket, tie, and some short pants, and that is the way it's done.
If he got on all of that.
But what has happened, if you look at the business world, is the brick and mortar companies have taken a beating. Internet-based companies, or people that embraced the concept of internet-based marketing, have been profiting phenomenally. So you no longer see, and I'll call a few names: Sears, Roebuck, Walmart, even.
Right.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Is Amazon-like companies is the way that people do business. And they ship. So I shop, not me, because I like the interaction. But my wife certainly is somebody that does her shopping on her computer.
Right.
And if you look at opportunities that has created now, anybody who acknowledges that the cheese has moved, or the conch has moved, depending on who you want to listen to, would realize that there's no point crying over the reality.
Right.
Adapt, make yourself marketable, and go after it with a vengeance. And perhaps what the Bahamas needs to now do is to recognize that since the world has changed so dramatically in 20 to 22 months, that a lot of the disadvantages that we have had for decades, we can now catapult ourselves forward if we would only believe and be so bold as to do it.
Yeah. So Doc, let's pause right there and help define what is that reality. What is the COVID reality? What is the connection that is needed? So if we look at some of the fundamentals of COVID and how it's transmitted, why some groupings of persons are high risk or high transmitters and some may not. Would you want to touch that a bit, not to get into too?
Okay, very quickly. So confirmed cases around the world, some 250 million. Confirmed deaths, more than 5 million. In the Bahamas, we're approaching 25,000 confirmed cases, although it's certainly far more than that. And at least 660 confirmed deaths from COVID, 130 or so with COVID, and another 67 deaths to be adjudicated or characterized.
Right.
Which means that the world has taken a beating from COVID. We are now starting the fourth wave. And the things that have made a difference has been masks, social distancing, vaccination, hand washing, and sanitization. The way forward.
What about immune systems? Builders, immune system builders, busted, whatever you call it.
I think that is interwoven into this whole thing, because what we have learned is that sick people, and Bahamians are the poster children for the sickest people in the world,
Oh boy.
or the least healthy people in the world. So your immune system is very much on display, either because the people that have a bad immune system are more prone to catch it, and then the people that do really worse is when that immune system goes haywire and attacks the body. So what works, we've learned, is vaccination works, and all of the other things that we just talked about, even though we have been kind of lukewarm in terms of accepting vaccination. If you look at the vaccination rates, we had a peak in September of about 25,000 during that week. And it has dropped off consistently every week since.
Since then, right.
To the point now, we are at a very, very frightening low rate of vaccination. The approach to mask wearing and social distancing has also not been ideal.
Right.
And so it's like, we've taken the approach that, hey, we sick and tired of this COVID thing. Time for you to go carry a, what?
Yeah.
Because we ready to get back to business. But
Doc, we see people on the news, not just locally, but internationally, and like they have no mask, no social distancing. They're in stadiums, they're at concerts, wherever it is. And so Bahamians say, well, if everybody else doing that, why we need to? So what do we say to them?
So let's look at the great social experiment of Britain and Europe, but Britain in particular. So Britain in July, on the back of a pretty aggressive vaccination campaign,
right,
decided that it was going to abandon all of the public health measures. No masks indoors, matter of fact, no masks pretty much anywhere, no need for social distancing. And some people call this reckless. And at first, it appeared as if this was a brilliant concept. And now what is happening in Great Britain is that they have the highest level of COVID infections that they have ever had since 2020. And their deaths are now climbing to an unprecedented level. The same thing is happening in parts of Eastern Europe and elsewhere. And so when we look at the peaks and valleys of COVID around the world, very clearly we have started on a fourth wave. And I think that should be a lesson for us in the Bahamas, that just as we're used to having the eye of the storm pass over us,
right,
and think that, everything cool, we could go outside.
Yep.
No, what it means is we have got to learn how to live with COVID, at least for, I would say, the next year or so.
Right. Good.
And as we live with COVID, let us figure out how we can flourish, thrive with COVID. And I mean that by exploiting opportunities. When the world serves you lemons, make lemonade.
Yeah. So we're going to get into some of those opportunities after the break. But I just wanted to let's finish the connection with people. So what is fueling COVID's perpetuation? Why it's continuing to do, whether it's a mutation or it's just the same continuing. What do we need to do to stop that?
There are several major factors, and I'd like to briefly talk about them. One, you're dealing with an organism whose only purpose, if it were, is to reproduce itself.
Okay.
And in order to reproduce itself, it needs to find virgin hosts or hostesses.
Right.
And so
when you say virgin, these are people who don't have any resemblance of COVID prior.
Right. Never been infected with it before, not been vaccinated, and whose immune system allows COVID to set up and replicate.
Right. Okay.
And so what COVID does is it will infect the nasopharynx or the oropharynx, the mouth, the nose, the respiratory tract, and start to replicate in your body. Hundreds, millions, billions, trillions of copies. And then if it kills you, well, too bad, because it's going to infect somebody else who's likewise.
Okay.
And then in the course of reproduction, there will be mistakes in the RNA of that coronavirus. And so you now get the alpha variant, the beta variant, the delta variant, the lambda variant, the mu variant, etc., which may or may not make this virus even more aggressive. And as we've learned from the delta, it is much more aggressive, much more transmissible.
Right.
And so as long as you have virus, two, the disparity in management approaches, both diagnosis, treatment, vaccination between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. So if you look at what has happened, you have had not a fair or global sharing of resources, masks, gloves, whatever, vaccines. So the rich countries have it all, and the poor countries don't have much. We are not going to be safe until we're all safe.
Right.
And so as long as you have huge pockets of people in Asia and Africa who can now take this virus and create new variants, the next wave is going to be potentially even worse than those that have come before. And in the wealthy countries now, they're going to say, okay, you need not 2 shots, but you need 3. No, you don't need 3, you need 4. No, you don't need 4, you need 5. Because vaccine nationalism has created, like I say, the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And as long as you have have-nots, the haves are not going to be safe.
Right.
3, we're moving into the winter in the northern hemisphere, certainly. And so the expectation is more people are going to be inside. And as long as you're inside, you're more likely to spread or share respiratory secretions. And then finally, money. Countries now find themselves in the economic conundrum of buying guns or butter. And so are we going to pay for food, or are we going to pay for personal protective equipment, medication, nurses, etc.? And for many people, it's an obscene but real choice that you're going to pay for what you absolutely need to the detriment overall. So COVID will have, when history is written, we will see that COVID has reduced us to the most basic form of humanity possible.
Okay. So folks out there, welcome Jonathan Ferguson, and you're also welcome to ask your questions online, and we will try and see if between Dr. Sands and the good fellow who sits on the show list next to him can answer the questions. So Jonathan Ferguson says, why are vaccinated people avoiding gatherings with unvaccinated people? Are they being overly cautious?
No, I think the odds are that the persons who are unvaccinated are statistically more likely to be infected, to be statistically more likely to spread COVID, and a
variant too, eh?
And variants. And even though you have protection that reduces your risk of hospitalization or death by 90% or 95% in some instances, 90 to 95% is not 100%.
Right.
And so you can be vaccinated and still get COVID, and still end up hospitalized and still end up dying. And so I don't think it was a big mistake for the world to adopt the belief that once you're vaccinated, you're good. Go and have a good time and take your mask off and go enjoy life as if nothing has happened. That was a big mistake.
Yeah. Well, that brings us right into my next questions here, which was because Peter F. Drucker said that you can't manage what you don't measure. And so when we look at that, what do we as people of the 242 need to be measuring in order to combat and break this COVID up and down and mash them up, like we say in the Bahamas? Mash them up, man.
I think we ought to be measuring everything.
Now, this is the people first. We can go to people, then we go to government, and we can go to the medical profession. So there's 3 categories specifically what each one need to do. Yeah.
So we ought to know your status. Have I been infected? Have I not? Have I been vaccinated? If so, with what? And what are the odds? And then be very aware of your surroundings and the people in your bubble or in your space. In terms of government, I think one of the things that we have perhaps done is to measure, but we have not shared that information with the community to let them know what has been measured,
right? Okay.
How those measurements impact the decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you start this conversation of your population and leadership, now you have one heck of a symbiosis.
Mm-hmm.
So as you start to have the conversation about if this happens, then we're going to need to do this and why. Mm-hmm. That's a far cry different than waking up and somebody say, okay, as of today, you're not going home 10 o'clock.
Yeah, so we're going to tackle that in a big way after the break, because that is a critical item to me and why we haven't been as successful as we could be, the communications. And also now the medical profession.
Well, the medical profession, locally, the medical profession, interestingly, has not been as engaged in the public health decision-making as it should have been, nor has the medical profession been as involved in the administration of vaccines and other things. And I think that has been to the detriment of the program.
Okay.
And particularly when we start talking about children, if you get to the point where you're going to start vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds, then that can't happen at Loyola or at some major vaccination center. That ought to take place in the office of the pediatricians,
okay,
who have a discussion with parents or guardians to explain risk and benefit and so on and so forth, because you're talking about a value proposition that's totally different than an old rusty man like me, who has a higher risk of infection and death than a child,
right?
And for whom now vaccine safety becomes even more critical.
Yeah. So then those pediatricians can use facilities like this, which we are now in the virtual facility, in order, because to have all of those children come into their office might take forever. And if they have a database or grouping of persons, there are people, they could probably have them connected and do many seminars with them to help them understand why. Granted, you still need to have a personal discussion, but at least the basis, by the foundation of it, could be discussed as a group.
Yes, but bear in mind that so many things have happened, particularly to our children. Okay. They have been deprived of face-to-face education and everything that goes with that. Yeah. For many children, that means they've been deprived of a decent nutritional set of meals in a day. For some of them, it means that they have been subjected to mental and sexual abuse.
Yep.
And so I think as a country now, the idea that you re-engage health professionals to monitor what's happening to the most vulnerable in our community is a timely thing. And particularly to look at what's happening with their neurodevelopmental milestones, to look for signs of psychological distress, etc. And so we can use COVID as an opportunity to reset what's happening with these children.
Right. Yes, that's great. So you mentioned that there wasn't I should say, continuous or a uniform communications between what was measured and with the public. And so one of the questions I had here was in terms of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, that the Ministry of Health report, the COVID report, that pretty much focuses on hospitalization and deaths. In terms of meaningful KPIs, I don't see the number of me knowing that there's 20,000 or 800,000 or whatever actually means something, because that doesn't really cause me to do anything. But when I hear deaths, it might trigger my my senses, and if I could feel and touch and see people who are dying, that might be triggered even further for me to act. So, but these are all outputs. Are there any more outputs that are being measured? And then also, are we measuring any of the inputs? Because I think the inputs, but anyway, answer the outputs first. Because
one of the problems of a fellow who is grounded in information is that you ask these reasonable questions. And what we have done as a country is we have taken a very paternalistic approach to COVID. I am going to tell you that this is good for you, and therefore you should do it. But I am not going to arm you with the information, the raw data with which I came up with that suggestion, decision, recommendation, directive. And for many very, very reasonable Bahamians, that's anathema. It's very, very difficult to know, well, where are you coming from with this? And did you think about this particular issue? Have we measured that particular issue? How is that going to impact this problem, food production, etc.? And it all comes crashing down when we take a position that does not share the data. Now, I produce the data. I say, this is how I interpret the data. I welcome you to give me a different assessment of how I should interpret that. But here's what we're going to do on the basis of that. And if we see a 20% increase in the following metric, then we're going to do this. Now, I may disagree with your approach, but I at least understand that you have an approach, that you have a rhyme or reason, and you seem willing now to engage me in the conversation. And boy, when you start doing that, that is the model of civil society. That is the model of civil society. That is where you have government by the people, for the people. And people are engaged in determining their livelihood, because we're all going to rise or fall or fail together. Right.
Totally agree with that. And so up on that question then, because I see that as one of the major disconnects that we have. And Josh McDowell speaks to it when he talks about some of the things that happens in terms of relationships and what happens when a relationship does not exist. And so that bridge needs to happen. And so we encouraged our people in public office today, whether it's the politicians, whether that is the state persons, whether that is the clergy, whether that is the civil business, whoever it is in public, to find ways of developing relationships with their people, whether it's the public or just the customers or whoever it is. Now, we saw at the beginning that there was a fear factor, and we all were in compliant, total compliant with whatever was put out there. Even though, like you say, it might have been from the point, like in the old school, where we say, if Grammy say, do what I say, not as I do, or all those old colonial type things that we were taught. But that fear factor disappeared, and then COVID became mystical. It was just a number. We didn't know people who were having it. I think my doctor, Judson Enos, was one of the first that I actually was able to put a face to somebody who actually had COVID. And that was how many months in. So my question is, how do we not make it mystical anymore going forward?
Well, I think it's a little bit more involved than that, because people have paid an incredible price due to COVID. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their homes, been put out of their apartment. They've been unable to feed their children, and so on and so forth. And so when you have this magical number about, we had 12 cases today, and it didn't directly involve you,
right,
or somebody that you know, but you no longer working, and your family says, how are we going to eat today? Now that becomes a very different issue.
But do people know that it's COVID that is the stimulus for a lot of this happening?
Well, on the one hand, they may know it, but they're also getting fed a healthy dose of misinformation and disinformation that COVID is not real.
Right.
That they only lie into you to control you. That they want you to take this vaccine to sterilize you.
Right.
That, all you need to do is take a little hydroxychloroquine or a little ivermectin or some vitamin this or some vitamin that, or drink some noni or whatever, and everything's cool. And, if you hear some well-respected people say this over and over enough, you're going to start to believe it.
Yes, true.
And now you start looking at the fact that wealth is being concentrated more and more in the hands of those who need it less and less in the hands of those who need it more and more. And you start to believe this conspiracy theory that this is the great COVID financial heist.
Right.
That I now take from Black and brown people and put it in the hands of the uber wealthy.
Right.
So Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all of these people now worth billions and billions and billions of dollars more than they were at the start of this thing that supposedly shut the world down, but I can't pay my rent.
Right.
So, what I can believe these fellas for, and I might have had a little runny nose.
And you had bush medicine to keep it going. Yeah. So, Doc, we're coming up onto the break now. So let me ask this one question here before we go to the break, in terms of how does comorbidities, age, high contact jobs, artificial ventilated spaces affect this movement of the rate of COVID spread? Are they factors, or are they just in name?
They all, this is the perfect storm. And, we have talked about how Bahamians have the greatest level of chronic non-communicable diseases in the world. More hypertension, more diabetes, more overweight, more cancer, and so on and so forth. And now this virus comes along, and we have a disproportionate negative impact. So that certainly in the month of October, the Bahamas had arguably the highest death rate from COVID in the world.
Okay.
I'll say that again. Because we are so ill, chronically ill,
right,
malnourished, our immune systems are destroyed by our horrible diet, lack of exercise, and the fact that we don't take care of ourselves. We found that we had the worst outcomes from COVID in October or thereabout in the world. Now, Cayman has taken that over.
Okay.
But when we adjudicate the next 67 cases, we may come back near the top.
Yeah.
And when you add to that indoor spaces, poor ventilation, the fact that we got people jammed up on top of each other,
Yep.
It has created a horrible mess, particularly since many people don't have the opportunity to isolate by themselves.
Right.
So if I live in a house with 8 people and one of us got COVID and we got one bathroom in the house, we'll be
Yeah, and some of them time share in the house too. So some go to work, some sleep while they working, and this and that and the other, and what have you. And so before we get to Vanessa's question and go to break, the last part was on age, was one of those items. So I think it was a report that seems to be holding a lot of credit these days from Hannah, and it's I think he said it's consistently saying around the 60 to 69, the 70 to 79, and the 50 to 59 are the 3 top ages that have the most deaths. And so I would look at that as an engineer and say, okay, so that's telling me that we need to find out how to stop or minimize those age group persons from being exposed. And so what are the criteria, or you mentioned the family, but what are the other criteria where those age groups might be getting exposed, why they might have the highest death rate?
Respectfully, I would like to suggest that maybe that is a little bit too simple.
Okay.
That the idea that you can put those individuals in protective bubbles and protect them from their children, from their teenagers.
No, what I'm asking is those persons have. Everybody has a certain lifestyle, right, that we get into. So those age groups and stuff might have. I guess I'm asking the question in a voice way. Are we drilling down using UB or whoever it is to drill down into those persons who have died in those age groups to find out if there's any commonalities so that we could reduce the number of persons who are being exposed from that group? Because it might just be education to somebody who's coming home, like you said, and going sitting on Grammy's lap and say, "Hey, Grammy, and she asks you how your day, blah, blah." That might be a simple reason, but there might be other things that is happening too. Somebody, whatever it is, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think we have engaged the Bahamian public adequately in the conversation about COVID in language that people understand necessarily.
Okay.
Or acknowledging their preconceived ideas. Because communication is a two-way street. It's not speaking at somebody or talking at somebody. It is listening.
Yes.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yep.
To find out what people really believe. And then once you understand that context, then I think we would be able to deal with this the same way that we tackled HIV/AIDS.
Right.
In the early days, and some would say reasonably well. So here we are. We're in the middle of a lull or an eye of the storm, and forgive me some license. It's a new day, and perhaps what we can do is to recalibrate the approach to make sure that education, dialogue, conversation, because even if it's not another variant of COVID, some other virus, some other infectious disease, some other pandemic is coming.
Right.
And if it ain't coming this year, it's coming next year.
Yeah. All right. So we will get Vanessa's question after the break so that we could pay some of the pipers. So you've been listening to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. Our special guest today is the good doctor, as I call him, Dr. Duane Sands. And he's been dropping some nuggets on the table here to help us connect between why we need to break the back of COVID and how it will help us to get relief from our sufferings. And our sufferings go far, not just medical, but we have political, we have economic, and we have social as a whole. That whole gamut And we're going to touch on a lot of those after the break and dwell into whatever we can get done in the time that we have allocated. Adam, producer, thank you, and take us to the commercials.
Sammy's Chicken. There's nothing like it.
This is Coach Danzel Knowles, founder and head coach at 242 Elite. I just wanted to talk to you guys about our first trip in program history to Orlando, Florida. On this trip, we went, like I said, to Orlando, Florida from July 1st to August 3rd. We played in 5 tournaments. We had at least 5 or 6 scrimmages. Came out with at least 25 games for the month. On top of that, the guys had workouts with prep school coaches. They had a few college coaches watch them, and 5 out of 9 of our guys have interest from prep schools and college programs thus far from the trip. I think it was a great experience for the guys. It was a great experience for myself. I was very proud of our guys. We had guys who were underage playing. We had some guys that even had their first time playing basketball, organized basketball this year. We came up with 2 second place and 1 first place. I think we did, again, pretty well. We hope to see the program strive. We're hoping to find a permanent sponsor to make this a regular thing and to keep it going and keep helping our youth get better opportunities and follow their dreams. We want to say thank you to all our sponsors, everybody that donated, and we couldn't have done it without y'all. So again, thank you, and we hope to see you guys again soon when we go off, hopefully in December.
Welcome back to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We're having this discussion this evening with the good doctor, Dr. Duane Sands, who is walking us through the COVID journey and how we were able to connect what we need to do going forward in order to break the back of COVID. Welcome back, Doc.
Thank you.
Great.
You know, like you said, this is a lot to cover in an hour. But I think, you know, these bigger themes allows people to be able to see beyond
right.
the carnage that everybody talks about, you know, the death, the suffering, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And to hope that there are some silver linings in this cloud.
Yes, but we're going to talk about some of those in a second. And so Vanessa Coley here mentions that he said, for all of the reasons earlier treatment needs to be given greater focus in an effort to reduce hospitalization?
Vanessa, that is an excellent suggestion, except that COVID nationalism means that for many countries like us, early effective treatment is impossible to get. I mean, yes, we have dexamethasone. Yes, we have tocilizumab. But many of the newer therapies, and now we have a few new monoclonal antibodies and antivirals that are there that may reduce the risk of hospitalization by 80-90%, but they ain't selling it to the third world. They're not selling it outside. Not to make people cynical,
Right.
but Pfizer's vaccine, they will sell some $35 billion worth of their vaccine this year. And most of that is being sold to first world countries.
Okay.
And so as much as it has been a game changer, it has been a game changer in G20 countries, not in countries like the rest of the world, except in instances where we have been the beneficiaries of the largesse of the United States, who would have gifted a significant number of vaccine doses. But in Africa and parts of Asia, etc., Pfizer does not exist.
Yeah, but Doc, I know you're a medical professional, but you think it's time, with all of these realities on the table, and we always talk about the G8 countries and the G20 countries and what they do to smaller nations and islands, ocean nations, etc. But do you think it's time that we start to listen to some of these people that we consider bush doctors and the like, and researchers and stuff, and see how we could devise some medicines and stuff from our own extracts that we have here? Because I mean, a lot of some of these, I shouldn't say a lot because that might be a reckless statement, but there are, at least I've been made aware of a few medicines that have come from extracts that came out of either our backyard or some backyard similar to ours, where they used as an active ingredient in whatever the clinical medicines that was created. So I see that as an opportunity for us, and we said we can talk about opportunities, and so that's one of the things that I had as an opportunity that we could look into. So how feasible, or how, I shouldn't say feasible, how sustainable is that really?
This was something that we started to work on in the last days of my tenure as minister, to create a desk or a program to look at indigenous medications, Saracine, fever grass, noni, goji, whatever. Okay, so, Saracine, most of us grew up, I can't stand it, mind you. But if you ask people, I think it works.
And all of those too. All of those.
It works.
Crazy things, yeah.
The issue is that we haven't invested in it. And what we will do is wait till somebody with some money comes in, patents it, and then what we do, we are constrained to be the producers or the growers of this product that our grandparents have been using for hundreds of years, and we get cents on the dollar.
Right.
And then it becomes like aloe has become cure-all to the world. So yes, we have to be bold enough. We have, and I think this is a self-esteem issue here, because what good comes out of Nazareth, eh? If you don't believe that there's any good that can come out of the Bahamas, now I don't believe that, then automatically you would believe that your natural or indigenous products have no value. Now that said, that doesn't then translate into, man, take some lizard blood, put a little croton leaf in that, mash that down, okay, and drink that, and that's going to solve COVID. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that we have not invested, nor have we investigated adequately. And this is certainly a shout out, a challenge to UB to lead in that charge. And it should be monetized, even if we start small. To look at 4 or 5 in the first instance of the things that people believe in. And maybe we'll find that there's phenomenal benefit in some things that people find to be junk.
Right. Yeah. So what other kind of opportunities that we could see coming out of this that either directly can help us with COVID or to get the economy going?
So I'm glad you asked that question, and I will probably disappoint you a little bit, but I'm gonna take a stab at it anyway. We've talked about diversification of this economy for a long time, and diversification is going to take us a little bit of time. But as we diversify, we are pretty doggone good at tourism.
I agree. 1,000%.
I suggest that we become the crucible for the development of COVID-safe tourism in the world.
Yes.
Demonstrate how to do it properly, perfectly, well, and take it to the bank. So that people say, boy, you know, I would want to go to this country and I want to go to that country, but you know, the safest place for me to go is the Bahamas. Because they got them protocols down like that. They know how to do it. I don't have to worry about getting sick, that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, and so on and so forth. Now, once you start doing that and the dollars start coming in the treasury, now I got money to pay my rent. I got money to invest. I've got money to put my children in school, build me some apartments, invest in some businesses, and so on. Boy, we are the success story. And that $10 billion of debt now is down to 9.5, 9, 8.2, etc. You remember the Singapore story? Remember some of the Middle East or the Adriatic countries that managed to solve what seemed to be structural debt. Again, we've got to be bold and brave. But a failure.
Yes. The Prime Minister told the world to be brave. So we need to be brave also in our doing. So on that same point, right, because I've written many times on Facebook about this, that yes, we need to diversify from tourism per se, but within the system of tourism, we have yet to scratch the surface of our potential, in my view, and so forth. And so, for example, I live with a mother who is a hotelier of the year, right? My sister developed the small hotels thing for the whole Bahamas, small island treasures or whatever you call it. I can't remember the exact name for it. When she was in tourism, none of them are in tourism today, and there got to be a wealth of other people who were in tourism or who have value for tourism who are not in it. We used to have 6 million tourists coming here on cruise ships, but we only tap into $10 them spending. So that means that we're not providing a product for them to spend more. It's not that they can't spend more. It's just that they don't have something to spend it on. That's the complaint that we always get. And so I am looking to say that, okay, digital is a big thing. And if we find ways of embrace the whole society, then we could move forward with opportunities to raise the lid for everybody. I don't know what is the mechanism to put in place for that, because everywhere I go, I seem to be bucking my head. You reach a certain point, then it seems like you're hitting a wall. You've been at the what do you call it, the mountaintop? So,
he caused me a joke on that. I think we have to embrace who we are, acknowledge what we have, and showcase that to the world. The wannabe, the impersonator, the a person that mimics what somebody else does, it's not authentic. And you'll get a few people that want to come to the Bahamas to see Las Vegas, but most people, they want to come to the Bahamas to see what the Bahamas has to offer.
Yeah.
And let's get our product right. Let's Disney World, and I mean the branding.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Let's get the Bahamas to have that kind of brand recognition and do the product so well that and so safely that people want to come back here. It means that a lot of the excesses that we tolerate, we can't tolerate anymore. And one of the biggest issues will be crime. And crime at every level, forgive me for introducing this sore point, but as serious as COVID is in this discussion for the resumption of economic activity in the Bahamas, we've got to figure out how we jettison our embrace of all sorts of crime. Because as long as we hold on to that, it's going to be very difficult to grow.
Yeah, very much so. And so one of the things that you would have touched on earlier would have been capitalizing on what, at least this is where opportunities come in, capitalizing as engineers. This is what we were taught to do, is to capitalize or to find solutions for challenges that people have, right? My son just came from France en route to the United States and got to the airport and realized that he couldn't go to the United States until he go through a quarantine period. So there's a number of people who've been on the news who've been eager to get into the United States, but they could come to the Bahamas. So to me, based on the United States rule, all we have to do is find a way for them to come to the Bahamas, entertain them in a space, whether you want to call it a COVID bubble or whatever you want to call it, on the islands, and then they could go into, and so that's volume of persons who would have been here for a week, 2 weeks, or whatever it is that they could spend their money and go. And these could be high-end people or medium-end people, but we have to get to the point where we have monies flowing in and to the country.
But it cannot be on a wing and a prayer.
No, it has to be intentional, and that's what this show is about, intentional thought.
To measure it, you've got to monitor it.
Yep.
You've got to ensure that your product is consistently of high quality, is safe.
Yes.
And that every time somebody has
clean got to be there too.
So when you're in a ditch, the first thing you need to do is stop digging. Okay, in order to get out. I mean, we are in a ditch right now, and some people say I'm guilty of asking people to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But honestly, if we do not figure out how we work together to solve some of these challenges, then the Bahamas will be constrained to the scrap heap of other failed Caribbean nations.
Yes. But one of the things in order to do that also is that you need brain power and people power. And I don't mean brain power like people say in all of brain drain going out the country. We're just talking about people. And COVID is taking out people. So that means that the pool of intellect that we have is getting smaller with COVID. And so I think if people understand that if they protect themselves against COVID, then they will have a better opportunity for us to all use our resources and our human capital in order to provide these solutions and opportunities and work with people who might have money in the country. Because I'm sure the government has come up with incentives for people to spend their money into developing these things. And then I have to be positive on that, otherwise I drive myself to drink. That we need people to do these things. But if you out there fumbling around and getting COVID all the time and running the risk of throwing your dice and you might not be here tomorrow, then you cannot contribute to this new built environment that you're talking about.
So this forces me to be a little bit reflective. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 45 years ago, we would have been on your mother's porch playing basketball.
Yeah,
and
true.
I'm sure that we never imagined that the weight of some of the challenges facing the Bahamas would fall so squarely on our shoulders. But it does. And that's probably a good thing.
Yes.
Your mom has now run her leg of the relay, and she's handed that off to you, Dylan and Danio. And, likewise, my parents, my mother's still alive, has done the same thing. And I hope that we are able to run as good a leg as any, so that when we hand it off to our children, who have their own ideas as to what should be done and how it should be done, that the one thing they can say is, you ran a good leg, thank you very much, I'll take it from here. Because there is no white knight, or knight on a white horse that's going to come in to save us. All of us are going to have to work together, put our heads together, and figure out the solutions to the Bahamas. And just like the generations before us would have tackled very, very serious challenges in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and 90s. Well, in 2021, 2022, that is the load that we got to carry.
And so that goes to relationships, in the sense that we have to build them, and Josh McDowell says that truth without relationships leads to rejection, rules without relationship leads to rebellion, discipline without relationships leads to bitterness, anger, and resentment. It's about relationships. So my question on that, as we wrap up here, is that, are we, from where you sit, having walked around the world or the Bahamas, the 242, as a high professional in public life, and you've also been beat up by the public somewhat, that do you see the eagerness of our people to forge these relationships and to extend beyond our myopic space to get the ideas on the table and the suggestions and the people with the money to come forward and be investors in our nation?
I see that the majority of Bahamians yearn for a more progressive, more inclusive Bahamas. There are some who could care less and whose only interest is themselves, but they are in the minority, albeit a very loud, vocal minority. And I would much rather focus on those who want to see a brighter day. And I don't pay too much attention to the naysayers. Being in public life means that you are going to have thick skin, and that you got to take your blows. I could throw a few blows myself, but I choose not to. But certainly this Bahamas, and this is the only country that I pay allegiance to, it is a wonderful country that just needs a little tender love and care and a little push to keep it going in the right direction. And right now that push has to be really, really hard.
So like they say, sometimes you just need a swift kick, and I think COVID is that swift kick. We just need to, maybe you haven't felt it yet, but when we feel it, then we should be moving forward. Well, Doc, it's been very interesting, this conversation. When we started out, we know, actually that's only one of my pages of questions, but we will have to find a way to embrace you to come back at some later time to maybe tackle it from a different angle and some other things. But before we go, though, do you have anything that you would like to share with the public? I've asked you a lot of questions, and you might have some things you want to say.
I think a fitting way to end this is to remind people that notwithstanding the current lull in the apparent COVID numbers in the Bahamas, that we are still way, way behind the world in terms of our uptake of vaccines. And I would strongly, strongly endorse, support, promote that people go get vaccinated. If they have questions, I have offered myself to answer those questions. I've given my number out. I'll do it again, 424-7290. But let's go ahead and get vaccinated.
Awesome. On the show, we always say vaccinate or isolate. I think that's the only two choices that my engineering background teaches me that we have at this stage of the game. And I don't think anybody want to isolate, so we know what is the next best thing to do. So thank you, Doc. It's been real good. I love that you took the time to brace the public and through the show platform to help them understand and connect with why we need to do the things we need to do in order to break the back of COVID. And we look forward to getting to the day when we could get back into a new built environment where we all been prosperous. We talked about that at the beginning, and you working with those two good people behind you to do these things. We also like to thank everybody out there on social media who's taken the time to sit and listen to us. I hope we went too daunting with our questions and statements. You didn't ask too many questions, but the questions that did come were good, and it gave us food for thought and help us to grow our mental faculties. And hopefully this has been of value to you. And if it has, then we encourage you to subscribe, like, follow, share the show, because there might be somebody in your network that can benefit from what was said here tonight. And so if you like and share the show, then they will have access to it as well. Thank you, Madam Producer. Love that you were able to keep us on target, and we just over 13 minutes, but we'll get there at some point in time. If you want to be a friend or sponsor, hit us up on Facebook or the YouTube and let us know what you want to do. By all means, be safe, vaccinate or isolate. Thanks again, Doc, and we will see you next week, next time. Same place, same Black Channel. And Doc, you do well, and say hello to the family. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.